Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's special topic briefing presented by the Allegheny Conference and Brookings Metro. I'm Stephanie Pashman, the CEO of the Allegheny Conference, and I'm very excited to be joined today by so many regional investors and partners for this timely and relevant briefing on the Brookings study, Commonwealth of Innovation, a policy agenda for revitalizing Pennsylvania's economic dynamism. I just want to begin by thanking and acknowledging the sponsors who made this event possible, Giant Eagle, Highmark, and PNC, as well as the 250 regional employers who make up our Regional Investor Council. Thank you for what you do to support and engage with us. You are the backbone of our efforts to improve the economic future and quality of life of our 10-county region. And I most importantly also want to recognize the Henry Hillman Foundation that provided the funding for the report that anchors our discussion today. Dave Roger, the president, who you'll hear from in a moment, is a true partner supporting us in helping to position the region and the Commonwealth for the future. And thank you to the panelists and speakers who you will hear from in a moment. We look forward to your insights. Before we begin the program, I do want to take a moment to put some context around our conversation today. Prior to the pandemic, as you all know, we released a 10-year vision for vital, globally competitive Pittsburgh region where we can all thrive. And we defined aspirations and an ambitious vision for our next generation economy that would be thriving, inclusive, and globally competitive. And despite the challenges we face, I am committed to that vision and optimistic as well. But I do want to caution us that we have headwinds. While employment nationwide has rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, our region continues to lag, unfortunately. And we know that we have demographic challenges. Since the 1990s, Southwestern PA has been the largest metropolitan area in the country to experience national population loss, which has been driven by a constantly dropping number of births. And unfortunately, our GDP growth between 2019 and 21 was only 4.5%, or 4 percentage points fewer than the rest of the nation. So that is why today's conversation is just so critical. The Commonwealth of Innovation report gives us a roadmap for growth, something we so desperately need. I want to point out one critical piece of this that is important to understand. When we think about innovation, and we're going to talk about innovation today, our minds quickly go to Bakery Square, to Lawrenceville, to the urban core, to Carnegie Mellon, and creating robotics company. But innovation is something so much deeper, and what this report captures is that essence. It's about more efficient farming, new technologies for our tool and die manufacturers, new discoveries to improve our health. And most importantly, it's about inclusion and it's about people. There's a powerful graph in the report that shows you how innovation is linked to improve wages and quality of life. And that is why this matters to me, and that's why this matters to all of us. This is how we give people opportunity. We in this region have come together around a shared vision, and now we need the state to deliver as a partner with us and on behalf of all of us. I'm returning from a pretty inspiring inaugural in Harrisburg. The Shapiro-Davis administration is prioritizing business investment and economic development in ways that we so desperately need. And we have the opportunity to work with them to design a new model of economic development, one that increases state investment to drive economic growth, implement policies that support innovation clusters, and foster overall an open for business mindset at all levels of government. In a moment, you're going to hear more about the work that the Shapiro-Davis transition team did under Matt Smith's leadership and some of their strategic objectives. Matt, who is our Chief Growth Officer, chaired that advisory committee for economic development. But before we move to Matt, I want to pass the baton to Dave Roger, president of the Hillman Family Foundation, who's going to say a few words. So Dave?
Try that again. Good morning, and thanks again, Stephanie, having a little trouble with the mute button. Thanks everyone for taking the time to be here this morning to learn more about this important report on innovation in the Commonwealth, and specifically what it means to us here in Pittsburgh and the southwestern Pennsylvania region. The Henry L. Hillman Foundation's involvement with this work dates to 2017, when we collaborated initially with the Heinz Endowments to commission a Brookings report that was titled Capturing the Next Economy. At the time, we'd had a conversation with Brookings about whether they could help us better understand what's driving the regional economy. It turned out to be a timely and pivotal exercise and has helped guide the region's strategy in supporting innovation since it was completed. An important aspect of that report and its recommendations was asking the question of what do we need to do to make sure that we retain our competitive advantages in innovation And how do we do it in ways that are both sustainable and provide access to those who have not historically benefited from the growth of innovation-driven industries here? The report that you're going to hear more about this morning builds on that work and offers new ideas on how we can advance a strategic vision for innovation both in Pittsburgh and across the region. In spite of the difficult period we're living through now, we remain very optimistic that this region can capitalize on our unique assets to help drive investment, growth, and improve quality of life, both here and across the Commonwealth. So with that, I'd just like to thank Stephanie Pashman, CEO of the Allegheny Conference, and Matt Smith, Chief Growth Officer at the conference again, they've been indispensable partners in this work. Thank our panelists, and of course, thank Mark Miro and Rob Maxon at Brookings for their excellent work in preparing the report. So I'll hand it back to Stephanie from here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate those remarks, and most importantly, your leadership in helping to propel our efforts for a globally competitive economy. And now I'd like to hand it off to my colleague, Matt Smith, the Chief Growth Officer of the Allegheny Conference, and also the Chair of the Advisory Committee for Economic Development for the Shapiro-Davis administration. He had the opportunity to help shape the future in the sectors of agriculture and rural, business development, transportation and infrastructure and innovation, and develop a roadmap for the state. So with that, thank you for your participation today, and thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Stephanie. And I would just reiterate Stephanie's appreciation and note to Dave Roger and the Hillman Foundation, who have really been instrumental on this particular issue over the last several years. They really helped to catalyze a very important discussion in Pennsylvania, I think, and hopefully that will turn into public policy and investment that we know will be transformative. As Stephanie noted, I had the honor of chairing Governor Shapiro's Transition Advisory Committee on Economic Development that included the 4 subcommittees that Stephanie noted. As part of that larger committee, we had a specific subcommittee focused solely on innovation and how to increase Pennsylvania's capacity in this space. One of our members was Mark Miro, who we're very excited to hear from today. And I think the fact that there was a separate subcommittee specifically focused on this topic, standing alone, is, I believe, very important and shows that the importance that Governor Shapiro and Lieutenant Governor Davis and their administration are going to place on developing a robust Pennsylvania strategy focused on innovation. I think it's also worth noting that a very familiar face to the Pittsburgh region's innovation community, Rick Seiger, is the governor's pick for the Secretary of Department of Community and Economic Development. We all know that Rick will bring a wealth of experience, most recently and notably from his work at CMU as Tim McNulty, who's on our panel and we're going to hear from later today, as Tim McNulty's colleague. And Rick will bring a very unique perspective and set of expertise and experience to bear on innovation. I think it's also important to note that some work on the core business environment has been done recently in Harrisburg, namely reducing the corporate net income tax rate, which was completed last year and will be phased down and cut eventually almost in half or over a half over the next several years. And I think the strong focus on raising the net operating loss carry forward cap, which, while we fell short in the last legislative session, is flagged as a top priority, I think, in a bipartisan way heading into this new legislative session. We're going to continue to work on that issue because we think it's very important across the business community and economic growth spectrum, but we think it's particularly important in our startup community and within industries that are cyclical. And we will continue to push that issue. We're very appreciative of the work over the last couple of years that our legislative partners have engaged in a bipartisan way. We obviously want to express our appreciation for the corporate net income tax rate cut to Governor Wolf, who really worked in a very unique bipartisan way to accomplish that over the last legislative session. As we look ahead to the new Shapiro administration and a new General Assembly session, we think there are significant opportunities in this space for bipartisan consensus and progress, from state level support and strategies and a focus on leadership in this space to enabling the deployment of tech-enabled platforms, as Stephanie noted, in farming and agriculture, in energy, in advanced manufacturing, to also aggressive economic development focus and specific investments that we know will catalyze this specific space and can result in business investment and talent attraction to our region. As I reflected on how to best set the stage for this morning's conversation, I kept returning to a very underlying notion that I've heard very frequently from both Mark Muro and Rob Maxim, and that is Pennsylvania, and more specifically for today's discussion, the Pittsburgh region has assets already in place that other markets would love to have, from our world-class universities that attract top 10 level federal investment with strong applied research legacies to companies investing here right now in high growth sectors. We're going to hear from Justine later today, representing one such company in Astrobotic. We also importantly have a history and legacy of collaboration across parties, labor and business working together to support regional initiatives. And we're doing just that with several federal initiatives and plan to do that on the effort to land a regional tech hub that has been created via the CHIPS and Science Act. The positive news, recognizing the several challenges that we have, is that a lot of this can be solved and addressed via leadership, investment, and smart public policy. And for us, that conversation really begins today with our panel and the work that we're going to undertake with the new administration, as well as the new General Assembly. And I want to note our appreciation for all the work that's been done to date through the transition process. As I noted earlier, Mark Muro served on our innovation subcommittee and was an integral member of that conversation in driving the conversation to focus on a lot of the issues that we're going to talk about today and that Brookings has talked about within Pennsylvania over the last several years. So first, I want to introduce Dr. Roger Davis to guide the remainder of the program. Dr. Davis is the 9th president of Community College of Beaver County and the college's first African-American president. Under his leadership, Dr. Davis has transformed the college's culture and strengthened its status as one of the region's most respected community colleges. Notably, his strategic leadership of CCBC Foundation has resulted in more than $25 million in grants and gifts. Dr. Davis is an active community member and serves on the board of many local organizations, including March of Dimes, Western Pennsylvania, the Beaver County Chamber of Commerce, Beaver County Educational Trust, Heritage Valley Health Systems Board of Directors, and the Beaver County Tourism Advisory Board. He also serves as a committee member for the Allegheny Conference and Pittsburgh Regional Alliance, Talent Steering Committee, the Remake Learning Council, the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, and is a board member for EntreEd, the National Consortium for Entrepreneurship Education. He also serves as an educational lead in several projects, including the Build Back Better Regional Challenge that the Allegheny Conference successfully, with our regional partners, secured last year. So I'm very happy to turn it over to Dr. Roger Davis to continue the conversation and really lead today's panel as we move forward. So Dr. Davis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. And thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited to dig into this topic. But first, I'd like to do some housekeeping rules. What's going to happen in just a few seconds, we're going to break it up into 3 portions. We're going to have a presentation portion, then we're going to go to a brief panel discussion, and then we'll end up with a Q&A session. Throughout the program, if you look on the bottom of your screen and just put your mouse there, you should see a Q&A icon. And if you don't, click on the little 3-dot more buttons and you'll see a Q&A, and that's your opportunity to submit questions that we'll address at the end. As you see the questions that are being submitted, you also can do an upvote by just clicking on the thumbs up icon near the question. And anyone that has more of the upvotes, the question will move to the top, and those probably will be the questions we most likely will focus on. So I've got the housekeeping rules out of the way. So it's my honor at this time to introduce Mark Muro, the Senior Fellow, and Robert Maxim, the Senior Research Associate at Brookings Metro. Both of them are researchers and authors behind the new report, Commonwealth of Innovation, a Policy Agenda for Revitalizing Pennsylvania's Economic Dynamism. Mark and Rob have been analyzing innovation policy in the Commonwealth since 2019, and they're here this morning to present their finding, which are very timely based on the inauguration of the Shapiro and Davis campaign. They also are, it's timely because our economic priorities are being reset by our state leaders. And so I'm excited to turn it over to Mark and Rob. So Mark and Rob, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. Davis. Thanks everybody for turning out on a gray day And also to Stephanie and Matt for just superb leadership, as well as to our friends at the Henry Hillman Foundation, which kept us sort of on the story here over the last 4 years or so, really. In any event, my colleague Rob and I are delighted to give you a quick briefing on our new report, Commonwealth of Innovation. Here that is, you can see in the next slide. That's a quick look. It's a follow-up to the follow-up. We did a follow-up in 2019 to the original Pittsburgh work, looking statewide. This was also funded by the Hillman Foundation. Our report was designed really at the outset to kind of level set an urgent moment in the Commonwealth. We first looked at what other places were doing in 2019. Now we came here and look at actual needed policy changes. Frankly, the report that you see here is a check-in on a state with a ton of promise that is nevertheless, we believe, adrift. We think there's tremendous upside ahead of the state now, but there's some work to do. So that the new governor appears to care about these issues vitally makes this an exciting moment. So given that, let's go to the next slide. Our plan today is to quickly set out the state's drifting situation on innovation, and then to suggest some policy-related problems and understanding corresponding recommendations. I'm going to start out, and Rob will pick up the story. We'll keep it tight so we can keep moving through this. Let's move to the next slide. Let's dig into some of the trends we see. And again, we're talking mostly this morning about statewide trends. I want to say that, but you're going to see a few relatively, I think, encouraging slides about Metro Pittsburgh. But first, it's important to note that Pennsylvania has that rich innovation history that Matt alluded to. You have these not just strong, but powerhouse R1 and R2 universities, including top 25 research powerhouses in Pitt and CMU alone in the region. For years, likewise, the state was an innovator at innovation policy, I would say, by creating the Ben Franklin Technology Partnership long before other states were talking about the regional nature of these innovation clusters. Then the Life Sciences Greenhouse Initiative, something a number of other states looked at. And then the Keystone Innovation Zone tax credits. That's an impressive lineage, really. What's more, supporting innovation has been a bipartisan tradition until fairly recently. Governor Thornburg created the Ben Franklins, and Governor Casey continued it. Governors Ridge and Rendell were each supportive of tech-based economic development. So that's great. That's a wonderful starting point. But as we see in the next slide, the state is in recent years, then we would say low profile on innovation activities, with recent governors mostly AWOL on basic benchmarking on these topics. And basic benchmarking, as you can see here, static. To sum that up, you can see here, the state has been ranked on dozens of innovation metrics by two of the leading state innovation capacity indexes from the Milken Institute and ITIF. And you can see over 20 years, the state's been stuck in really the same second echelon, despite its top flight assets. It's not a disaster. It's only, I think, disappointing compared to some of the starting points that you have, some of the assets. And it's been going sideways, really not a lot of movement over a significant amount of time. Let's go to the next slide. But innovation matters so much. And because of that, the state's innovation drift is resulting in broader economic drift that we think people feel, a sense of drift. Pennsylvania is struggling with plodding sub-average productivity and income growth, as you can see here. Moving to the next slide, contributing to this and directly related to innovation shortcomings have been sub-average advanced industry growth. Why advanced industries growth matters because those innovation-driven manufacturing, health, and digital concerns anchor your high-wage, high-export sector. This is the crucial place where innovation activity plays out into high value economic activity and employment. But at the state level, at least, growth of these high quality jobs has remained tepid compared to peers like Michigan or Indiana, which are competitor states with, in some ways, we would argue, less impressive starting point assets. But let's move on to a couple bright spots before we move towards policy. There are bright spots in the state. To begin with, even though some growth has been slow, the state has been building up, especially in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, a number of very compelling advanced sector industry clusters, such as the cell, gene, and immunotherapy complex in Philly, and here in your region, robotics and autonomous systems for sure. You can see here a schematic look at some areas with above average location quotients or specializations in the state. These are your core assets economically. This is where you're beginning to reshape the economy and beginning to see a yield of employment. And then let's go to the next slide. Metro Pittsburgh has actually seen some of the most encouraging signs of innovation vitality in the Commonwealth. And we did look across the state, and we looked at all of the metros along with this. So that ranking is based on what we see. And for one thing, universities are turning in some of the strongest work in the state around academic R&D and its conversion into commercial activity. Here you can see in the dark blue and darker yellow bars, Pitt and Carnegie Mellon's respective striking outperformance of peer school norms for IP licenses and options, one measure of tech transfer vitality. So these are not just solid, important institutions. They're institutions that are actually outstripping their peers in tech transfer and beginning that journey towards job creation. So I think that's extremely important and something many places simply don't have. Let's go to the next slide. The region is also seeing genuine signs of what you really want. That I've been implying advanced industry growth reflected in job growth in those key clusters. And here you can see this in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh saw solid job growth in the sector straight through the 2010s, right up into the pandemic, which has created the trough you see at the end of the line chart and that Stephanie mentioned. But this is advanced sector growth, employment growth over the last decade plus. And this is the solid showing. It's led the state. It's much steadier than in Philadelphia, for example. Allegheny County has led the state in this critical subset of growth, which we would argue is where you need to begin to transform the broader economy. So let's transition to policy. These are a few of the mixed trends underway in the state. It's time now to turn to underlying problems we see in a few of the recs that we've been making, including to Governor Shapiro's well-managed transition. So here I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Rob. But first, let's go to one overview slide. I want to just get us started with a quick overview of our overall agenda. And then Rob is going to walk us through pieces of this. Basically, we highlight 4 priority themes for unlocking the innovation capacity of the state and promoting greater participation and innovation for all people in all places, importantly. The top, you can see we are really challenging the state to, first of all, commit to innovation, as it has not really done in the last decade plus. The state needs to try harder. We think it's not pushed hard enough as its competitor states has. Many states are doubling down on this. It's time for Pennsylvania to. Beneath that, we call out 3 needed themes for serious work. These entail, you can see, accelerating commercialization in the major university hubs like Pittsburgh, then fostering innovation in the rest of the state, namely in smaller metros like Erie, say, and then insisting on inclusion that can't be avoided. And so with that, Rob's going to look at the cross-cutting vision and these three themes one at a time. Rob?
Great. Thanks, Mark. So moving on to the next slide here, our first point is that, as Mark alluded to, Pennsylvania state government has really in recent years lacked a clear commitment to supporting innovation. So as we show on the right, even with the modest boost to innovation funding in the most recent state budget, Pennsylvania's innovation funding is really just a fraction of where it was prior to the Great Recession in 2008 to 2009. And then beyond that, Pennsylvania really lags several peer states when it comes to investment in areas like tech transfer and other related innovation investments, with Ohio in particular spending about 5 times what Pennsylvania spends in a typical year. So in response to that, moving to the next slide, we see the need for 3 key policy areas. First is that Pennsylvania state leaders need to set a vision for innovation. So that could consist of the governor and other state leaders leveraging the bully pulpit to convey the importance of innovation and the need for policy supports. And we think that the state government should also convene business leaders from across the state to develop a new innovation strategy commission with the goal of publishing a state innovation strategy to guide the state. And really, we think updating that strategy at regular intervals. Next, the Commonwealth, we think, needs to center innovation in its economic development activities. So, that means in addition to a commitment from the governor, he should also appoint innovation champions to other high-level economic development positions in the state. And then we identify a variety of moves that the governor can make to elevate the cause of innovation. Things such as updating the mission of DCED to more clearly embrace innovation, and elevating the importance of the Office of Technology and Entrepreneurship. And then finally, the Commonwealth just needs to rebuild its innovation budget. The state needs to shore up its core innovation programs like the BENS and the life sciences greenhouses, but also to make new investments in communities across the state, which takes us to our next policy theme on the next slide. This policy theme is really about maximizing the potential of the state's bigger city, Research One oriented startup and scale up ecosystems like those that you have in Pittsburgh to unlock more commercial activity and more employment. These innovation ecosystems, as Marcus said, have been generating a ton of IP, but as you can see here, they're not converting their above average R&D into new firms in promising areas. In particular, Pennsylvania lags not only competitor states, but the nation as a whole when it comes to new tech and innovation intensive firm formations. So moving to the next slide, given that the state, in our opinion, needs to enhance its investments into supporting the growth of science-based startups in its largest innovation hubs. In particular, we think Pennsylvania needs to generate more bottom-up region-based ecosystem building by challenging its university-based innovation communities to compete to win what we're calling in the report a Pennsylvania Innovation Hubs program. That would be a major $30 to $50 million grant program designed to advance compelling plans for regional innovation ecosystems. And meanwhile, other aspects of these investments mean embracing basic best practices that other states are doing. Things like helping more communities in the state win large innovation-focused federal funding opportunities, or establishing an SBIR and STTR program, state matching program to further support startups in Pennsylvania to win federal funding. So moving on to the next slide. Well, Pennsylvania has significant, if underutilized, innovation assets in its largest innovation hubs. Innovation is also struggling right now outside of the state's larger metro areas. And our view is that the unevenness of the state's innovation economy is reinforcing the economic unevenness and really contributing to the worrying political divides in the state. As you can see from this graphic, Allegheny County is really one of the core drivers of advanced industry growth, but other regions in Western Pennsylvania are really struggling. So moving on to the next slide, here we suggest that the state repeat our proposed innovation hubs idea with a competition for 10 to 20 smaller regions to win $2 to $4 million awards to stand up transformative initiatives and catalyze innovation and entrepreneurship in smaller regions. We also suggest several complementary policies, including establishing an innovation voucher program to help advance industries firms in the state get support from universities, and investments to boost statewide innovation networks like the Invent Penn State Launchbox Network. And then finally, moving on to the next slide. Okay, great. In addition to inequality by place, Pennsylvania's innovation and entrepreneurship system is unequal across different demographic groups. In particular, women, Latino or Hispanic, Black, and Indigenous workers and entrepreneurs in Pennsylvania are greatly underrepresented. So on the right here, we show the stark disparity in ownership of firms with employees in Pennsylvania. So despite accounting for over half of Pennsylvania's population, women are majority owners of just 18% of employer firms in Pennsylvania. And as you can see, Latino or Hispanic and Black entrepreneurs each account for just 1% of employer firm ownership in the Commonwealth. So we think that there's a lot that can be done on the inclusion front. So moving on to the next slide, I just note here that we have a variety of policy items, but we recognize that even probably fully enacting everything we lay out in the report still wouldn't go far enough to rectify racial and gender imbalances in the state's innovation system and really the nation's. But broadly speaking, we see three themes that the Commonwealth can focus on when it comes to improving innovation and entrepreneurship inclusion. The first is growing a more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem. So the state's already taking some steps to this effect, things such as its efforts to center inclusion in the state small business credit initiative program. Other ideas we suggest include creating a state CDFI fund, growing the state's Minority Business Development Authority loan program, and better leveraging public procurement to support underrepresented entrepreneurs. From there, we think the state can do more to get underrepresented workers into advanced industries, those innovation-intensive advanced industries careers. We note in the report that there are a lot of great regional and local efforts attempting to do this already. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we think the state can play a bigger role in funding and convening the variety of regional organizations already focusing on connecting workers to advanced industries jobs. And then finally, we think the Commonwealth should work to make STEM education more equitable, from pre-K to higher education. So to do this, we suggest policies like creating a new program to attract diverse STEM professors and doctoral students to Pennsylvania universities and create more STEM research opportunities for diverse undergraduate students. But waiting until students get to higher education to support STEM is often too late. So as a result, we include several ideas to bolster STEM education for underrepresented students at the pre-K to 12 levels, things such as strengthening the Pennsylvania Department of Education's PA Smart Grants, which supports STEM education in schools across the state, among other ideas. So that gives you a feel for our agenda, and really based on how he's discussed it today, we're looking forward to how the new governor is engaging on innovation, and really turning into a priority and bringing potential real investments to it. So I'll turn it back to Mark now in case he has any other items he wants to add.
I think that's a good overview. We appreciate the time here, and I think we'll kick it back to hear from a terrific panel. Thanks so much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Robert, for sharing with us today. I want to remind the audience again, there's a Q&A, and you can put your questions in the Q&A. We do have some questions coming in, some very good questions. So I hope you'll do that. And remember to click thumbs up for the question that you think you really would like us to answer at the end. I'd like to take a few moments now to get some reactions to the findings and what they mean for our region from two people representing sectors highlighted in this report. I'd first like to welcome Justine Kashniza, founder and board chair of the Keystone Space Collaborative and shareholder at BAPS Calland in Pittsburgh, and Tim McNulty, associate vice president for government relations at Carnegie Mellon University, who joined the discussion as fellow representative of higher education. Welcome to both of you. During the registration process, we asked many of you to provide questions in advance, and the first one was related to education, so I'll take that one. The question is, what role do we see career and technical education in both secondary and post-secondary education playing in the Pennsylvania economy? Well, I want to start by saying I've been hired for 25 years, and this is the first time that I have seen parents changing the choices for their children's careers. Pennsylvania has the fourth largest higher education landscape in America behind California, New York, and Ohio. And for the first time, I'm seeing parents say, liberal arts are passe. Parents are coming forward saying they want their children to have a technical skill or a technical credential. And I think what's happening is they want the children, what we're seeing is the children are going back to work and then going back to the four-year degree. For the first time among the 15 community colleges, we are driving our curriculums through career and technical education. And you see for the first time, systems like PASHE are coming into workforce development, saying they want to help in that area. I think we're moving for the first time from the information economy into an innovation and technical economy. And so in Beaver County, we have two of the largest companies here, Shell Plastics, and we have Tenaris, which is one of the largest steel tubular companies in the world. And this college works with them on training and providing talent. And we also are talking about carbon capture in Beaver County. Beaver County is open to this technology solution. And so I think that's how I answer that question. At this time, I'd like Justine to quickly introduce herself and her role in the innovation economy of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Thank you to the Allegheny Conference for having me here today. My name is Justine Kashnitsa. I am a shareholder at Babst Calland, where I chair our emerging technology practice group. I have been in Pittsburgh for now 15 years, serving emerging technology companies from a legal perspective as a corporate and technology attorney. I've seen tremendous progress in terms of companies growing here in this region. We have made this our home. And as part of that work, I've spent a decade serving as outside general counsel to Astrobotic Technology, Pittsburgh's neighborhood space company. Many of you probably know about Astrobotic. It had its origins at Carnegie Mellon, spun out, and after 13 long years of effort, are now 200 people strong on the north side and contributing greatly to the regional economy. In the work with Astrobotic, I have delved deeply into the commercial space sector from a regulatory and industry perspective. And in watching Astrobotic grow and look to both making key hires from across the country, we saw a real need to elevate what Astrobotic was doing into a more regional opportunity. And right before the pandemic, I co-founded with a number of space professionals in the region, the Keystone Space Collaborative. It's a nonprofit organized to grow, convene the space ecosystem and defense innovation ecosystem in the tri-state, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia area. And I'll be glad to talk a little bit more about that later.
Thank you, Justine. Tim, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, and thank everyone for putting this together and all the participants. My name is Tim McNulty. I direct government relations at Carnegie Mellon, which essentially means I have this great front row seat on all the incredible things that our faculty and students do. In a prior life, I had the great honor and privilege of working on technology policy in the Ridge administration and had a chance to see all the wonderful potential for innovation that literally exists in every corner of the state. So thank you for the report. Looking forward to this great discussion.
Okay, Tim, so I'm going to throw the first question to you then. With Pennsylvania's new administration and the opportunities that lie ahead, if you this is your big wish list now. If you could ask the governor for any one thing throughout the next 4 years, what would it be?
So I think the report does an excellent job, as Rob and Matt just laid out, of providing a roadmap, a blueprint and a roadmap for the path we have to take to realize our full potential as a state of innovation, as a state that harnesses technology to create economic opportunity. I think, though, if I had the starting point for me, I would step back and maybe touch on some of the themes and the roles of the governor that Stephanie alluded to. I think the first and most important role of a governor is to really set a vision that excites and energizes the entire Commonwealth. And that frames for all of us just how transformative these opportunities are. Howard Joseph, who's one of our great roboticists, always reminds me that if 10 years ago you were to ask someone, what regions of the country are going to lead the transformation of transportation and space and fields like agriculture, I mean, the answers you would get would be places like Michigan, Florida, maybe the industrial Midwest. But right now, today, researchers, entrepreneurs like those at Astrobotic and workers across the region here in Pittsburgh are really shaping the future of those industries. In that case, it's all been built off our strengths, largely our strengths in robotics. And at the same time, those strengths in robotics, those breakthroughs in robotics can make these industries more accessible to people throughout our region, to make it possible for individuals with all different kinds of backgrounds and skills, living in all different communities in our region, to participate in the transformation of those industries. That, I think, is the great opportunity we have. And I know that the governor, Lieutenant Governor Davis, working with our great state delegation, they had the opportunity to really excite the entire Commonwealth around just how big this opportunity is. And then I think, we'll follow the blueprint going forward from there.
Thank you, Tim. Justine, I'm going to go to you now. You brought Astrobotic and Keystone Space Collaborative to the region, and that is incredible. But some people really might not understand how it's part of a larger cluster opportunity. So I'm going to put together 3 questions for you that I hope you can answer briefly. Why Pittsburgh? Why Pittsburgh, and what really put Pittsburgh on the map for this opportunity? Are there barriers that you see to this success, and what lies ahead for this industry?
Thanks for that question. So taking a step back, the commercial global space economy is projected to hit $1 trillion in the next decade. It is currently at $470 billion, and it has outperformed conservative expectations from the banks. It is growing at roughly a 9 to 10% compound annual growth rate, and that has been sustainably true throughout the pandemic and now through this economic downturn that is affecting the tech sector. This is great news. It is not a surprise. It is tied to the origins of space and the defense innovation in federal funding. And what we saw was that there was already activity happening and core nutrients and ingredients in this region, in this tri-state region, and I would say epicentered by Pittsburgh, with work that essentially gives us an opportunity to rise to the very top from a national perspective as leaders in a new space economy, to take and participate in this $1 trillion opportunity. The reason for this is, if you look at what the space economy is, it is broken into first order and second order impacts for economic development. Tim and others have mentioned robotics and autonomy. That is at the core of the new space economy. But more importantly, space is to be seen as an economic development enabler. We look at space as, and especially lower Earth commercialization opportunities, as creating an opportunity for life science developments, for material science developments, for additive manufacturing and advanced manufacturing developments. It's not surprising that everything that I just mentioned showed up on the Brookings report as key core strengths of the region, and in particular of the Pittsburgh area. We see this region and Pittsburgh again leading it as a core opportunity for us to claim our rightful spot in the nation. Just to give you, when we started off, the R.K. Mellon Foundation and Hillman Foundation got the Keystone Space Collaborative up and running, and we wanted to do an assessment to see where we were from a data perspective. If we look at our region as a tri-state, and I'm bullish on looking at it from a regional standpoint, because we will succeed and we will thrive and we will outcompete if we view ourselves as a region as opposed to individual states. But if you look at what we have about 500 participants, 550 participants in the tri-state area that are engaged in the space economy today. That is without much political will being invested on this topic. If you take a look at the revenues coming in by region, we are competitive, but trail space states like Texas and Florida and Alabama. But that can change because we have Class A universities, research and development universities, in particular 2 aerospace designated schools in Penn State and Ohio State. And the robotics work of Carnegie Mellon and the software and research work at Pitt really helps augment that story. We have Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, which is the center for the Air Force Research Lab, which is the hotbed of innovation funding for Air Force and Space Force related activity. We have NASA Glenn and the NASA Katherine Johnson IVNV Center in Cleveland, Ohio, and in West Virginia. These are driving distance to Pittsburgh. And most importantly, and something I'm very proud of, is in December, we announced the Keystone Space Innovation Center, which is now open in its temporary facility in Nova Place in Pittsburgh, that will go into a permanent campus location co-anchored by Astrobotic to really start building not just an industry cluster in Pittsburgh, but actually a physical campus location for companies to coalesce and grow this exciting and dynamic new industry. That is something that we then partnered with the US Air Force and Space Force to designate this as an AFWorks SpaceWorks hub. What that translates to is a long-term opportunity for significant defense spending to be spent in this region on innovation activities in dual-use technologies, defense innovation, and space-relevant technologies. We're thrilled to see where the Keystone Space Collaborative can bring this region to the forefront of the national conversation on space.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a good transition because the report talked about our state is really not flourishing in innovation, but you see the universities and colleges are at the top doing that type of work. So Tim, what can CMU, I'm going to put 2 of the questions together. What can CMU and other institutions do to convert the quality research that they're doing into commercial clusters, and how can we really leverage the large volume of educational institutions to maximize our region's opportunities?
Yeah, thank you. I think the report does an excellent job of highlighting once again that our starting point, our strength is the vitality of our universities, and the fact that our universities are leaders in all the major sectors that will matter for the future, from the life sciences to advanced manufacturing, energy, robotics. I think the question now is, how do we build the bridges to make sure that these engines of innovation reach farther into our economy? You know, the report mentions how good Pitt and CMU are at patents and at generating startups. Now we have to go further, you know, and have metrics. How many of those patents and startups are generating manufacturing opportunities for small firms across the state? How are we building an ecosystem so that those technologies, we're not only producing graduates in those major fields, but we can measure the number of students in all parts of our region, all parts of our state, who are getting access to those technologies every day in their education and after school activities. We have to build out the metrics and hold ourselves accountable. I know that's what excites our faculty. It's the challenge our president, Farnam Jarhanian, has given to the entire university. I know that's shared at universities across the state. One good thing is the Build Back Better challenge that President Biden awarded to this region really has many of these core building blocks in it to achieve these goals. And essentially, the president's looking to this region to be a model for getting at the very issue that you outlined.
Tim, one of our the audience members indicated that some of the programs they don't think in the state are working. Is there anything that you think the Pittsburgh region should adopt to move our region forward?
In terms of programs that might not be working, or what's your...
Even anything for the innovation economy, you know, just to move us forward? Is there something we're missing in PA?
Well, I think the first step because our aspiration is that the tech economy reaches farther, that It's a broader generator of opportunity. So it's not just generating opportunity around the universities, but across the state. And that, you know, space is a great example of how it can reach small firms and so forth. So I think that the starting point for that, in terms of thinking about new programs, is how do we broaden participation in innovation? You know, how do we use technology to engage individuals who are not at the research and development table? At Carnegie Mellon, for example, we have great partnerships with the AFL-CIO, so that workers are they're involved in the laboratories. They're in the laboratories helping shape the future of technology. We also have a Center for Shared Prosperity that's using the tools of data analytics and machine learning and so forth to give neighborhoods and communities assets that they can chart their own future. So I think there's no silver bullet, I think, in terms of any one program, but it starts, I think, with that commitment to build broader bridges and access to centers of innovation.
That's
And
lovely. Go on,
if I could just jump on that, I really think what I would like to see in this state and in this region is a rebrand, an elevated rebrand around being open for business and making that clear, both internally and externally. And, when Pennsylvania says we mean business, we put our money behind that. We need to have strategic influx of capital and investments made in the innovation economy in these clusters that are doing well, in the new ones and the existing ones. We need to support existing organizations like the Ben Franklin Partnership that executes on this, as well as new organizations that do the same. We need to also not underestimate the value of tax credits and tax incentives for cluster-based activity. That I've seen the power of the RCAP for specific projects, but that should be expanded to an industry cluster approach. There's specific targeted investments that can be made today that will manifest in tremendous economic growth through the innovation economy in the future.
Well, we already had an audience member write a comment about equity. And so, Tim, you kind of leaned into that. The final question is, how do we make sure all people have the opportunity to participate in the future innovation economy? I'd like to start with an answer. Robert went through it nicely in his report. We are one of the only states that really does not invest in early college. We do not fund dual enrollment for the last 6 years. We are surrounded almost by every state that has a free community college program, and we're behind. We need to decrease the time to degree. We have this archaic model of 4 years in higher education. This state needs to fund dual enrollment, early college, and scholarship funding across all sectors of higher education. And then lastly, I want to challenge higher education to be more innovative so that all of our residents have the opportunity for advanced learning, which will lead to sustaining life wages and keep our residents in Pennsylvania. Justine or Tim, any suggestions from you?
I'll answer this from the perspective of the Keystone Space Collaborative. We take diversity very seriously, but we look at it as both diversity in terms of geographic access as well as demographic access. From a geographic perspective, what we're looking at doing is, once we have the core assets of our conference, our challenges, our programming established, and the center established here, we are going to be building chapters in the regions across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia that are rural in nature, and to have them activate their own communities to engage with us. From a demographic perspective, that's a much harder question and a longer time frame question. I believe that the answer is rooted in STEM education at the earliest levels, K through 12. The data shows that most folks leave the STEM fields in middle school. One of the beauties of space is it's freaking awesome and cool. And I don't think it transcends demographic challenges and boundaries. And if we can leverage that passion and coolness factor and help motivate and create opportunities for folks to stay engaged, that's going to go a long way in creating a long-term pipeline through our educational institutions and the not just research institutions, but the vocational schools and the community colleges as well, to start creating a pipeline of talent. And the talent is both on the technical side and the high advanced field side as well. And we don't want to overlook that. And so it is an investment that we're making today to see benefit 10 years from now. But with the investments made in the innovation ecosystem today, I think we can address this from both sides.
Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you, Justine.
Yeah, I would just add an exclamation point, I think, to you both. And I think, Dr. Davis, your point is, we can't be a region that's a leader in technology and innovation if we're also not leading a revolution in education. And We have 70 colleges in this region, and we have great diversity in those programs in all fields, generating 40,000 graduates a year. So we have the talent. I think what we need to do is form the partnerships so we can strengthen the linkages between higher education and our K-12 system. And always remember that at the end, the key to technology is inspiration and excitement.
I'd like to bring back all of our panelists now and all of our everyone who started. Thank you. I'm going to throw the first question. Stephanie, I'm throwing the first one to you here.
I'm ready.
Okay. It says here, Pittsburgh currently trailing other metros in attracting mobile young talent that can work virtually. Given our high quality of life, affordability, and strong cluster of colleges and universities, what more can we do to attract young talent to study and stay in Pittsburgh?
Great. Thank you for that question. Actually, that's next week's event. We're actually in the process of really trying to launch a bigger play around talent in a robust coalition of, I think we have about 150 partners right now, with the idea that the more, and I think Kim just made this point, the more we come together in one unified voice. Companies are all out there marketing the region, universities are marketing the region, nonprofits are looking for talent. We're all trying to say the same message. And if we unify and take those assets and bring them together and collectively try and create some excitement around what's happening here with the talent that's here, and also communicate out to the region, and to the broader nation about Pittsburgh in a common messaging approach, we can be more effective in that regard. We've had a long history at the conference of B2B marketing, right? Talking to businesses about bringing investment here. And now we're going to spend a lot more time and investment and effort in investing in marketing to our talent, right? Because it's an equal conversation now. If we're going to get companies here, we have to keep talent and we have to attract talent. So more to come on launching a talent coalition, but that's a big play for us. And we appreciate all the partners that have already joined us in this effort.
Thank you. This one is for anyone, maybe Mark or Rob or even Justine. The question is, what specific KPIs are these initiatives being held accountable to, and how do these KPIs ladder up to the desired outcomes, population, economic growth? How are we really measuring the progress?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. And it's a great question because much of this is being recast. We're going to see in coming months and in the next year, I think some very systematic rethinking of how programs are run, what the programs are, how they're run, how do we ensure that they are working, how do we know that they're working? Those are the kind of things that I think the Shapiro administration should ask. I would somewhat move the discussion from, I think there should be KPIs and measurement of tech transfer for the universities, which has frequently been the center of the discussion. But I think Rob and I would probably move the central questions and evaluation to the delivery of how well the ecosystem is working. So things like, broader outcomes, investments from outside coming into the region, the ultimate advanced sector growth. Is this leading to firm growth and then job creation? And then measurements of how well the ecosystem is working. How does it accelerate the small firms once they have left the walls of moved beyond the walls of the university? What happens to them in the ecosystem of the greater Pittsburgh economy or the broader Pennsylvania hospitality to small places and small firms? So I think it's need to kind of be very thoughtful about what those measurements of success are. So great question. Thank you. And I think these are things for the administration to think about.
Yeah, I'd like that. We're really at the end, unless anyone else has a 15-second answer to that one. And if not, I'd like to pass it to Stephanie to close.
Great, thank you. Actually, I was going to add one point on that particular question while I close, which is to say, part of the value of this exact conversation and having a partner in Hillman that helps us perpetuate the conversation and hold us accountable and bring researchers like Brookings in is to be able to actually provide the KPIs for us, right? We do our own measurement all the time on how our work is going, but to have the outside view on how we actually are doing at a macro level and how the state is doing is, I think, what's really powerful here. And so we appreciate their partnership to continue this conversation. So as we make change, as we move forward in the state, we can continue to have them look at this for us and make sure we're delivering value. So with that, I would like to thank Brookings again for this incredibly valuable work, which is going to be a guidepost for us. Thank our panelists, Justine, Tim, Dr. Davis, you're fabulous moderating, my colleague and partner, Matt Smith, in this important work, and obviously the Hillman Family Foundation in making this webinar and this work possible. And to all of you, our partners out there, this is just beginning and the continuation of an important conversation, and we appreciate your partnership in this work. So have a nice day, everybody.